Okay, whether you're just joining me to see what I do with venison, or if you had the stomach to just watch the Suburban Outdoor Life videos on butchering this deer, this is the entirety of one deer. This is all of the skeleton, this is large pieces of meat, this is small pieces of meat. This is what we do with our venison. We don't waste anything. This is the backbone, this is the neck bone, this is the ribs, this is all of the leg bones once everything has been cut off of them. So what I do, I've got a 26 quart rival roaster oven here, plug it in, put everything in you can. If you can't fit the whole skeleton in at once, that's fine, because what's going to happen is in about an hour, 2 hours, this is going to start to cook down. You'll be able to add whatever you couldn't get in there initially, but I was able to get the whole thing in this time. So get everything in you can. I'm going to turn it on to about 250 degrees. I've got a gallon of water here. It's probably not quite going to be enough because you're not going to be able to cover all of the bones. Obviously, they're up above the level of the roaster oven. But you want to get this at about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way full, so that when it cooks down into the water. It looks like I'm going to need about another gallon, but I'll get that after we're done taping. And then you're going to pop the top on this. At this point, with this part of it, I don't add any salt. I just let it cook down. Once this is done, then I'll show you how, and it's going to take about 2 days, I'll show you how to get all of the usable meat out of this. For the 2 buckets that we have that we're going to use either scrap meat, we're going to use this to make hamburger out of, we're going to make chunk meat out of for like shish kebabs and things, or the large pieces of meat that we're going to use for roasts. We brine these, and the amount of time that we brine them is very dependent on the weather, because even though the salt that we're going to be adding to these buckets will deter bacterial growth, it is still very important that you keep this meat in this brine water at a safe temperature. So when the temperature outside, and that's usually where we keep it, is outside on the back porch, as long as the temperature outside stays under 40 degrees, then it's safe to leave these outside. If you're doing this in a warmer climate or at a time of year when the temperature doesn't drop quite that far, then if you have a walk-in refrigerator, you can do it. You can brine it in smaller batches if you want to put them in bowls in your refrigerator. But you got to make sure you keep these at a safe temperature, otherwise the meat's going to go bad. So my recommendation, this is how I do it. There might be other people that say that, the salt concentration might be different. I'm going to use about a half a cup of salt for about 3 gallons of water. Now each one of these buckets is a 6-gallon bucket. If you fill it up to this line right here, that's going to be the 6-gallon line. So even though there's not the meat up to that high, that's how high I'm going to put the water, because I want there to be a lot of water to soak this meat. So I'm going to put a full cup of salt in both of these buckets. All I'm going to do, sprinkle it all over the top, and then I'm going to fill the water up to this level. At that point, I'm going to put them outside where it's cold. Right now it is well below freezing outside, so we're hoping that it doesn't freeze. If it does, this might take a little bit longer. But basically at 32 to 40 degrees, I'm going to leave this salt on this meat in the brine water for 24 hours. Okay, after 24 hours, what we're going to do is we're going to dump all of the water out of this bucket. We're going to put another cup of salt in, fill the water back up to the same line, and then we're going to leave it for another 24 hours. That's about the time that I start to process it. Now, I know you're probably thinking, wow, that's a lot of salt, the meat's going to taste salty, but it really doesn't. The meat at this point is not absorbing the salt. The salt is drawing the blood out of the meat. So when you dump this off at 24 hours, that water is going to be red. After the second 24 hours, it's not going to be nearly as dark, and then when you process it, you're not going to have all this blood to deal with. Sorry, that's Lewis. So basically what I'm going to do now, fill this up, set it outside, and then we'll talk more about this later. Okay, as you can see, we've got our water up to the level that we want it to be on. I know this is kind of intuitive, but in case you didn't realize, you got to put a lid on this, because if you're going to put it outside, you don't want the critters to get into it. You can't just leave an open bucket of meat outside. And you can see the water's already starting to turn red. It's starting to draw the blood out. And in case you didn't watch the processing video, these are food grade buckets. You don't want to just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and get some plastic buckets and use them. These are actually food safe buckets. These are fermenting buckets for wine. That's why they're 6-gallon buckets. But obviously once we use them for this, we don't use them for wine anymore. So we'll check back in 24 hours and show you what it looks like when we pour it off. Okay, it's been 24 hours. We're going to open up the bucket, see what we got. Alright, you can see the water is really good and red. We're going to pour this off. Make sure none of the meat leaves. And you can see the difference in the color of the meat. It's a lot grayer than it was because the brine is really drawing the blood out. Okay. Now what we're going to do, going to put in another cup of salt, fill the water up to the line again, leave it for another 24 hours. We're expecting a deep freeze in the next 24 hours, so I may actually leave this for another 48 before I take care of it, but at this point you don't have to pour the brine off again. You can leave it sit in this brine until you're ready to take care of it. You just have to make sure that the meat stays at a safe range.